within 6 months, we tracked this data, of course, and we reduced the churn by 30% just by ensuring huge. Better alignment. Yeah. And that's also show the big impact on alignment without having like a 100 data to track.
Welcome to another episode of Excuse My SaaS, powered by ProdCamp, your revenue-centric user feedback platform. Today, we're tackling one of the most prominent and impactful yet underrated challenges in B2B SaaS, misalignment and cross-functional collaboration. Misalignment is not only incredibly prevalent in tech companies, but also a silent killer of efficiency, revenue growth, and team morale. Why should B2B tech professionals care? Because the stakes couldn't be higher. Misalignment directly impacts how teams execute, how they respond to customer needs, and how quickly they adapt to change. If your team aren't pulling in the same direction, you're leaving money on the table, and worse, you might not even realize where. So, in this episode, we are linking misalignment to something everyone talks about, but few truly leverage effectively: data. Specifically, we'll explore how common metrics and levels of visibility, or the lack thereof, can either unite your team or drive them further apart. And who better to help us unpack this than Charlotte Laplante, with over 8 years of experience in B2B product management and coaching. Charlotte has worked with companies at every stage, from startup finding their first product market fit to large organizations navigating complex transformations. She has a track record of helping teams align around capacities, execution, and yes, data. Charlotte's work bridges the gaps between product, sales, and marketing, making her the perfect guest to tackle this critical topic. So let's get into it. Welcome, Charlotte. Did I miss anything in that intro?
No, perfect. Thanks for having me today.
Great. So let's dive into it right away. We want to keep that back and focused, Charlotte. And maybe let's start with this. Misalignment has a cost, but it's often hidden. So in your experience, maybe what are the most overlooked ways misalignment can hurt a business?
That's a big question. Actually, I think the biggest hidden cost is the loss of efficiency. If sales, marketing, and products aren't aligned, they waste time on conflicting priorities. I've worked with companies where the sales was pushing for one feature to close deals while the product was focusing on a completely different roadmap. And you have the marketing also promoting something entirely different. The result is that you have slower time to market and frustration coming from customers. So I would say this is a huge one.
Yeah.
Another big red flag is the customer churn. Like if sales overpromises something that product doesn't deliver, we end up with unhappy customers, of course, that leave your product. I've seen this happen with startups that were hyper-focused on acquisition but neglected the long-term retention because the teams weren't working hands in hands and from the same data.
Right.
So yeah, that's one big topic. Maybe you want to focus on churn also, because churn is a big word, and maybe there are more to say about churn. And I think for this first question, it's really interesting to deep dive into it.
Yeah, let's go. Yeah, sure. Okay. Let's say a word about churn. It's we often say, things like fixed churn or things like that, and it's kind of hard to have a good grip on how to just fix churn. So it's interesting.
Exactly, and it was to mention that you don't have just churn. Focusing on churn is not really useful. What you need to understand is which type of churns you are facing today and how you can tackle it. You need to define first what type of churn you have. There's 3 types of churns. It really depends on the periodicity also of your product. So I'm giving timelines now, but it really depends on your lifecycle customers.
Yeah.
You first have the early churn. It's really at the beginning of the lifetime of your customers. And it may comes from onboarding issues or maybe something during the sales cycle.
Maybe misqualification of the on the sales side of things, and
Exactly.
the customer is not really well qualified to be in the product actually, right?
Yeah. And that's where you need maybe more communication between customer success, marketing, and sales because it's not well addressed, or maybe there is an issue during the onboarding process. So that's the first part. Then you can have another type of churn, which is right after. So can happen depending on your customer lifecycle, of course. After the first customer is onboarded, and it's an issue probably linked either the onboarding still or your product is marketed and how you can sell your product and reach the time to value for your customer.
Right. Maybe it's a matter of how the bridge is made between onboarding and adoption, and maybe there is a matter you can solve working with the CS team on how they onboard and the resources that marketing provide for onboarding, for instance, or enablement of the customers. That makes a lot of sense. Great. Yeah, I think that slicing the elephant like that really allows to eat it not in one bite because it's harder.
Yeah, I agree. And then you have really the churn, like the long-term churn, after
like the renewal date, for example, like when the customer is supposed to yearly renew. If it drops there, it might be another set of problem, right?
Exactly. It may be maybe because your customer don't need you anymore, and because they scale really quickly.
Like outside of what you provide. Yeah.
Exactly.
Great. And so maybe there's some product evolution to make if you want to retain those customers.
User research or market research, and yeah.
Right. Love it. Great first question. And I love that we dived into the churn aspect. That's really important. And it's also not always well utilized as a factor. So that was great to break it down like this. Now, if some of the people in the audience today, someone listening and feels like maybe their team are misaligned, but they are not sure what they can diagnose, what maybe is the most obvious symptom they should look out for? Misalignment is a consequence of something already, I guess.
Yes. I think you should look at how teams communicate. If you hear phrases like "that's not our problem" or "we weren't aware of that," you've got a misalignment issue for sure.
That's out of our scope, like kind of thing. Yeah.
Another sign is also when the teams define success differently. For example, the sales is focused on revenue, marketing, on engagement, and product and feature delivery without connecting the different topics. That's a huge sign of misalignment.
Yeah, you see marketing team emoji celebrate the volume of MQL, and then sales, on the other hand, missing totally the target. You understand that something is wrong. Okay, Charlotte, let's touch on data now. Why do you think so many companies believe that more data and better data will magically fix their company's problems? We hear that a lot in the industry. Everyone is, especially with AI, on the race for data. But is it really this magic one?
First, I think it's a bit trendy right now. So that's also why lots of people want to have data and look for data. But I think it's also because they feel like it's an easy fix. They think if we just track more metrics, everything will fall into place and that will be okay. We will go into our strategy. But in reality, data without the context just create noise, and it's worse. I've seen teams that were really droning into dashboards without actually making better decisions just because too much data and no sense.
Right. It can lead to just, how do they say it? Analysis paralysis or something like that. Like you just drawing into number and bumping from one to another. That's true. So what's maybe a common way team misuses or misinterprets data, especially when it comes to making decisions or executing in the same direction across sales, marketing, and product? What have you seen?
So in the previous question, I just answered that it's because it's two parts really complementary. Having lots of data, too much data, you will lose the context and it will be noise. You won't use everything. So this is a big topic. The other side is that looking at metrics in isolation. So it's a contrary, having too much data or only a few data and
only one metric. Context. Yeah.
For example, and so it's about the choice of which data you want to look for.
To look at.
So looking at metrics in isolation, for example, you have the marketing celebrating like high lead generation, but those leads don't convert. So the sales struggles, of course, to work on those leads that were tracked by the marketing team.
Right.
For example, product is optimizing for engagements, but if those features don't drive revenue, it's a dead end. So it's a nonsense. Just to give you an example, I worked within a company where within a month, we prioritize NPS scores without linking them to retention or upsells. So we had a great NPS, but we still struggled with churn because they weren't looking at the full picture. So one data without all the context and without the full funnel doesn't have sense.
Right. So it was just showing screenshots of good NPS at a particular moment in time during the usage and during the journey. It was not reflecting overall satisfaction. I think that NPS in most cases has this bias built in because it's very punctual. And maybe what should be looked at is NPS trend throughout the year and the customer journey. And that's a bit harder to do. So not every company actually does that. But it's a great point.
And any data can mean everything if you want to say in anything with the data. So yeah.
Exactly. And I think one of the big problem I've seen, and maybe you too, is that more often than not, we make a decision and then we go fetch for the data to back it up.
Exactly.
And that's not how research works. I mean, we can make assumptions and then verify those assumptions with data, but make decisions already and back them up, that's a bit biased. So, let's talk a bit about some of the things you might have seen. You work with startup and large organizations in the past 10 years. So in your experience, when and why can data sometimes actually create more silos instead of alignment? Any examples?
Definitely. When teams use data to prove their point rather than to find solutions, I think it creates more silos.
Right.
For example, I once worked with a startup where sales used the win rates to push for discounts, which is a good thing. But the products used feature adoption to justify their own priorities. So instead of collaborating, they were competing with the data.
Right, and totally disconnected as well. So great. Yeah, I think that's actually happens a lot. I've seen that in my career quite a number of times. So maybe how can teams recognize, when their obsession with one metric or another is getting in the way of collaboration or innovation?
When people start optimizing for metrics instead of business outcome. So if teams are making the decision just to move a number up or down, it's a nonsense. Like they are not questioning it. So it doesn't actually benefit the company. So a good sign that data is becoming a distraction and that is not nourishing the research, as we mentioned just before.
Right. So let's face it, misalignment isn't only about data and metrics, right? So what are some of the causes, behaviors of misalignment? We touched on some, like making a decision and going to look for the data. But what are the other causes and behavior you've seen over and over?
I think this one is really interesting also, like just to disconnect a bit from the data. I would say the biggest one will be the lack of empathy between teams. Like when teams don't understand each other's challenges, they blame instead of collaborating.
Yeah, pointing fingers.
Yeah. I've worked with sales teams that saw product as slow while the product saw sales as unrealistic, which is often the case. Until, they kind of sat down in the same room, just explaining what they were doing on the different teams. So together they discussed the customer feedbacks, and then it allows to provide more empathy between the teams and more collaboration.
Right. The root cause is often misunderstanding. It's not necessarily care. It's like not that people don't care, but that misunderstand what is the goal of the other team. So it's probably a matter of culture there for this part of the collaboration cycle. So if you could have a magic wand and fix, one behavior across these teams, what would it be?
It should be, I think, the active listening. Like if the teams really listen to each other instead of defending their own stuff, the alignment issues would disappear. Just to give you an example, I used to do this in my previous companies. When we had a meeting with cross-functional teams,
Mm-hmm.
I asked everyone to put their phone at the beginning of the meeting room, so no distraction.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't need their computer, they shut down and then just listen. And to me, that's the best way to have really everyone focused on the point of the meeting or the strategy, etc. And to really have active listening from everybody.
Yeah, no answering sales emails or
Exactly.
whatever. No cleaning your inbox during the during the meeting, right? I love that. It's a good trick. So let's talk about, maybe how data can enable alignment. When used effectively, how can it act maybe as a unifying force instead of a divisive one? What's the secret to making data maybe a shared language across teams?
The key, no spoil, is shared metrics. Just an example, in one company I worked in, we aligned on a single North Star metric, which
Right.
was like customer activation rate. That
Mhm.
meant marketing was focused on qualified leads, sales focused on conversion, and product focused on onboarding. So everyone was really working toward the same goal.
And you found a crossroad
Cross
metric
alignment, exactly.
is a North Star.
Yeah.
Love it. Great. So can you share a practical, a specific example of where data actually helped align these teams and improve the overall company efficiency to capture and deliver value?
So maybe another example where sales, marketing, product were misaligned. We implemented a joint reporting system where each team saw the same customer insights and we discussed it, and it was really shared feedbacks, which were really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Within 6 months, we tracked this data, of course, and we reduced the churn by 30% just
Oh,
by
wow. That's huge.
ensuring better alignment. Yeah. And that also show the big impact on alignment without having like a 100 data to track. We just tracked the churn and focused on one thing, and that showed the biggest results.
Wow. That's great. That like the common dashboard, I think is really a powerful instrument. Really, it's I haven't seen often companies managing to have actually a common dashboard across teams, across all teams. Sometimes two teams, yeah, but the whole every department, it's much harder. So that's a great one.
Having public dashboards is really a good thing to do.
Right. Great one. Leaders often intentionally maybe add to the misalignment by focusing solely on their own team's goals and being protective about it. How do you coach leaders to create alignment without turning it into a political power struggle?
Well, I think I tell leaders to act more like connectors than just decision makers. And it's really
Mm-hmm.
the point to me. Great leaders make sure teams collaborate rather than compete for resources. That's the key.
Right.
One of my best experience was with a CEO who joined cross-functional meetings to reinforce the shared goals between the teams. So that's the meeting I just mentioned also before.
Mm-hmm.
And having this person within the meetings is just a small action, but it creates a really massive shift in how teams work together.
Yeah, that's great. So he was like kind of the champion of alignment on those meetings and ensuring that. And did that last for a long time, or was it just for a short period of time for him to kind of put everyone in the right direction, or did it keep doing
It
that?
was really, sorry, it was really during a key period for the company where we needed to
Mm.
have more communication with top level also. So
Okay, yeah.
from both sides, it was really helpful for the teams, for the CEO to understand also the problematics. And I think it lasted like 6 months or stuff like that. So that's a huge period of time, but really helpful.
Okay, great, great. So when you're working with startups, what's the one leadership blind spot that tends to derail team alignment?
So I will keep to CEO's point of view also in this answer. I think the biggest blind spots I see is when CEOs treat product like a service team rather than a strategic function. Too often, product and tech team is viewed as the teams that builds whatever sales or marketing needs to close deals instead of being an equal partner in driving growth. We have mentioned it just before, but product is also there to do the research, market research, user research. So it's really important to see it like that. Another issue is, to me, seeing revenue as the only growth lever. Revenue matters, of course, so your company continue to work, but focusing only on short-term deal closures can create long-term problems. And I've seen it.
Right.
So instead of just asking, how do we close more deals? To me, CEOs should be asking, how do we scale without increasing the costs at the same rate?
Right, right. That's a very, very good point, and that's also something I've seen and even discussed recently with other product pros. And I think that this thing about the product being a service team comes from those old industrial models like the Porter value chain and all those things, like where actually you've seen that operation even and product is our support function, while
Yes.
in SaaS they actually totally embed inside the architecture, the value architecture of the company, and you get very different things when you put those things in as a support lines or as a part of and as potential growth levers. So that's a good one.
And also, if you don't consider product and tech team as a cost center or service
Right.
delivering stuff, it also creates more alignment because you will be able to discuss the future, the scalability of the company, and then to have a bigger vision of what will happen in the upcoming months, years, etc.
Right. And I think we're missing a lot, like the fact that revenue team, as you said, are not the only lever you can push for growth, and you can optimize a lot of different things across the board to optimize for the next step, and not only push on the marketing team to create more leads, on the sales team to just sell more subscriptions. So really love that one. Data gives you the what if it's used well, but it often struggles to explain the why. So how do you coach teams to and maybe leaders to balance quantitative insight from data with qualitative feedback from user, customers, team members?
I think that's a key question because everyone is asking this question currently.
Mm-hmm.
I always recommend pairing data with real customer stories. An example, in previous experience, we had data that showed users weren't adopting a feature. So instead of just tweaking it, we ran interviews and discovered they didn't even know the feature existed.
So simple fix finally.
Simple fix, onboarding email, adoption shut up. So really simple. But if you trust the
If you
only
don't know,
data you have first, you will do nothing better.
right.
Maybe another example, see at a SaaS company I worked with, we noticed a drop in engagement from enterprise customers. The number alone kind of didn't tell us why. So we reached out directly for conversations with our customers.
Mm-hmm.
And we found out that a recent UI update made the navigation a bit difficult for bigger companies. So it was another way to spot that it's not coming from sales or onboarding or anything. It was just a new UI stuff we needed to fix with the designer team. That's all.
That's great. That's a great example, of how you discover the why, the problem. So love it. In your experience, when working with companies on that matter, what are the typical roadblocks to effectively balancing qualitative and quantitative insight? How do you overcome this?
Well, just to sum up a bit also what I've mentioned before, I think one key method I use and I recommend is triangulation, meaning cross-referencing different data sources. So a combination of, for example, really focused on product, it maps funnel analysis, direct user interviews. So you have really a fuller picture of what's actually happening and why. That's a thing I recommend. If I had to focus on the biggest challenge I've seen, maybe is that quantitative data is easier to access, while the qualitative one, of course, it takes more effort than time, and it also depends on the type of customers you have and how available they are or not for those kind of problematics. So as a result, often companies are prioritizing the numbers because it's easier to get. This is where I think tools like PodCamp can help by centralizing inbound feedbacks from users and making qualitative insights as structured and accessible as quantitative ones. So you really have the same page on the two types of data.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly why we developed PodCamp in the first place. We know that product team and product leaders don't have much time there. And when your customers are willing to provide inbound feedback, it's great. And when you align with your sales teams or customer facing teams to be proxies for this feedback, then it's not only increased alignment, but also efficiency and control over what you ship. So thank you for pointing that one out. Anything you wanted to add here?
Maybe a bit more tips to balance both types of data. I think treat qualitative research as a non-negotiable part of decision making. It's not a nice to have. You need to do that if you want really to go into a long-term strategy in your user research. Set up continuous feedback loops rather than just relying on occasional surveys also is a good tip. Ensure that your insights from interviews, support tickets, feedback tools, etc. are reviewed alongside analytics and that they are shared with other teams, not only product teams. Misalignment always.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe, so just this way you will have the perfect balance between qualitative data, quantitative data, and you will work together rather than competing for attention.
Yeah, that would feed collaboration. So love it. Maybe for teams that today feels like they are speaking completely different languages, if there were one first step they should take to get aligned?
Visibility. Would be visibility. Why? Because they need to see what others are working on.
Right. Yeah.
I recommend what I mentioned before, but centralized reporting dashboards. So everyone can access key metrics from other teams, not the details, but big picture of the data of each team.
Sure.
Yeah. Second thing, the cross-functional stand-ups, 15-minute weekly thing between sales, marketing, product that help teams stay informed, and maybe CEOs if they want to.
If it's needed, yeah.
Yes. And third thing I would recommend, and it can be a good thing, is the customer journey mapping workshops. So you align all the teams on what is our customer journey mapping, what do they do, and which team can work on which part of this journey.
Okay, so 2 follow-up questions on that. So how do you make sure those cross-functional stand-ups are not turning into battleground for conflicting priorities? And then I will have a second one.
I would recommend structuring these meetings around specific themes, such as onboarding, adoption, expansion. So it keeps the discussions focused on actionable rather than broad and unfocused.
Okay, so segment by the funnel stage and have a focus on that one. Yeah, love it. Great. That's a great one. And so customer journey, I think, is a great starting point and it's foundational and few startups have a clear and good grasp on that. But what do you use? I personally like the RASI matrix. Probably you know it. Have you seen any specific framework or rituals that effectively help sales, marketing, and product work better together? And how do you make sure that stick? Actually, that's also.
I like the RASI, of course, but as I mentioned previously, I love the concept of North Star metrics. So you really have one objective and all the teams aligned on it. It's really a single success measure that makes a huge difference. Another powerful approach I like to use is the jobs to be done framework. So it shifts focus from internal debates to what actually drives the value for customers.
Yeah. Job to be done is powerful. I know it's widely used even today.
Yeah,
Good one.
and to me, it should be the start of any key meeting you have with other teams. Like as a reminder, okay, this is the framework we use. This is what we have in the roadmap or in the loop dealing with this framework. So everyone has in mind what we are using currently to draft the strategy.
Great. We said it earlier, in many companies, stakeholders often come to the table with conflicting priorities. So how do you help teams kind of cut through the noise and focus on what really matters? Do you have any advice on dealing with stakeholders and politics?
Of course. The first thing I do is I ask, what problem are we solving? So it really shifts the discussion from...
best favorite question.
Yeah. It shifts the discussion from who's right to what's the best for the company.
Right.
A useful tactic is to run alignment workshops where all the stakeholders map out their priorities and dependencies. So once everything is on the table, it becomes clear where the real bottlenecks are. Another key strategy, for example, is to create a decision-making framework. So maybe like a RISE or Jobs to be done on another framework, or you create your own and you define together the criteria for prioritization based on impact, urgency, strategic alignment. And once everyone is aligned on and agree on this framework, you can use it to maintain the priorities and the alignment within all the different teams.
Great. We're approaching to the end of this interview, but I have a couple more questions for you, Charlotte, if that's okay. I would like us to look ahead a bit with the rise of AI, automation increasing. How do you see data's role in team alignment evolving? Are there risks that teams should be aware of, and as they lean more on these tools?
I would have been surprised if we didn't talk about AI during this podcast.
Just a little.
Yeah, AI can surface insights faster, and I wait my word. But to me, bad data leads to bad decisions. So if teams don't ensure clean, structured data, AI will only reinforce the silos instead of fixing them.
Right.
One challenge I see is AI generating insights that lack interpretability. People trust the output blindly without questioning it.
Yeah.
So to me, the companies need to invest in explainable AI and keep humans in the loop to validate the findings. That said, of course, AI can be a huge enabler for alignment when used correctly. For example, you have today, and it's spreading within the different companies, but you have automated lead scoring that can help align sales and marketing. You have AI-powered customer sentiment analysis that can guide product decisions. You have predictive analytics that can anticipate the churn risks and get teams to act proactively, like customer success, sales, etc. To me, a key takeaway would be AI is a tool, not the strategy. So you need to embed it into a broader alignment process.
Love it. And I agree. Sometimes we have some of our customers asking us to have, we were talking about customer feedback earlier, and have the customer feedback being processed entirely by AI and have only the conclusion handing off to the PMs or the leaders of the company. And we're like, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't be confident, base your decision on something that was fully processed by AI. And especially at this stage of things when there is a lot of triage to be made, a lot of context, a lot of empathy to have, to be able to make sure that this is aligned with the vision, with the strategy and whatnot. So that's a great point. Maybe some final question to conclude our episode. You were starting over as a product leader today. Maybe what's the one thing you would do differently from what you've done in your career?
I'd say maybe I'd focus more on cross-team collaboration from day one. Right. Why? Because too often when you start as a product leader in a company, you get caught up in like execution without ensuring alignment. Yeah, exactly. Or really operational stuff.
Right.
So I would implement cross-functional things, like I mentioned, earlier and ensure shared metrics are set up from day one.
Love it. That's a great one. And now, last one, if you could ban one word or one phrase from every product team's vocabulary, what would it be and maybe why?
An obvious one. That's not my job.
Yeah,
to me, the alignment starts really with the shared ownership. If there is something to do, you do it. You don't say just, that's not my job. The best teams I've worked with had the mindset of really collective success rather than strict job descriptions. And that's the key. To me, the moment teams stop thinking in silos and start collaborating, everything changes.
Awesome. That's a wrap on today's episode of Excuse My SaaS. We've covered a lot of ground on how misalignment and data misuse can sabotage even the best intentioned teams. Thank you, Charlotte, for giving us some fantastic practical insights on how to address these challenges head on. We'll add the key takeaways in the description, and you can always continue the conversation by reaching out to Charlotte and I on LinkedIn. If you are in B2B SaaS, in a B2B SaaS company, and you've been nodding along, now is the time to share this episode with your peers and colleagues. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss future conversation with more incredible SaaS leaders. Thanks for listening to Excuse My SaaS. Until next time, keep discovering to build great product that turn into great businesses. Thank you again, Charlotte. It was great.
Thank you.